What's up guys, Chris Schwartz-Edmisten here from Schwartz-Edmisten Web Design. In today's video, it's going to be a mini masterclass in CSS targeting for Squarespace. So we're going to be talking about limiting scope. So we'll talk about how to target a single block. We'll talk about how to target multiple blocks in a single section. We'll talk about how to target elements on only a single page, and then we'll also talk about how to target elements on multiple pages. So if you're new to CSS, this is going to be really good information for you. And even if you're pretty comfortable with CSS, this will be a good walkthrough of how to only target the elements that you want to and how to control the scope of your targeting so that you are only targeting those elements. All right, enough to chat. Let's jump right in. So if I want to change a single block on Squarespace, what I can do is I can right click on it and click inspect, and that'll bring up my Chrome DevTools. And each block in Squarespace gets a unique ID. So right now we're on the link itself, but if I scroll up to the block level, and you can see that button blocks get a class of button block. And then here we can see it has an ID of block-UE and then a bunch of numbers. So you can't target normal UEs because these are dynamic and they change. So you can only target a UE if it has a block in front of it. So block-UEs, totally okay to target. So I'm going to use this block ID to target this one individual button. And in CSS, you target IDs with a hashtag, but none of the actual button style properties are on this container class with the ID on it. All of the actual properties are on the link itself. So here you can see the color, that's the text color, and here's the background color and the border color. So all of those properties are set on the actual A link itself. So I would want to target then the A link, open up some curly brackets, and now I'll just copy and paste those properties. And then we can change this to yellow, and we can change our background color to red and our border color to red. So now you can see I've changed the background styling for just this one button block. So what if I wanted to target multiple blocks, not just this one block? Well, you might be thinking, oh, well, I can then just separate these items with a comma, and then I'll copy this block ID, paste in the ID there, target the link, and then I can do the same for this button block over here too. We'll find the block ID, target it with a hashtag, and then target the link. And wow, look, I've targeted all the buttons here. Well, that's not a very efficient way to do it. Imagine if you had a bunch of buttons in a section to change. This is a highly inefficient way of doing that. So how could we target multiple blocks? Well, if we go back to our Chrome Inspect tools and we go back to this container class with this unique ID on it, we can see that all button blocks have a class of button block. And then if you go to the actual link itself, you can see that all of these button blocks have a class of SQS block button element medium. So all of these buttons are medium button blocks, and so all of them are going to have this class. And so if I were to go to this button block down here, you can see SQS block button element medium. So instead of having to use a bunch of different IDs here, we can instead use a class. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this SQS block button element medium, and we can replace all of this CSS with a single class. Now, the CSS is not applying you can see our CSS here is being crossed out, and that's because Squarespace is using two classes to target these elements, and we are only using a single class. So their CSS is more specific than ours, so ours is not being rendered. So all we have to do is at least match the specificity that Squarespace is using. So in this case, we have to at least use two classes. And so what we can do is we can target both of the classes that are on these button elements. So I can target both SQS block button element medium and also SQS block button element. So if you are targeting multiple classes on a single element, then you target both of their classes, but you don't include a space. So all in one string, essentially, you're targeting both classes with no spaces. So another way that I could have included two classes, like let's say this only had SQS block button element medium. So another way to include multiple classes would be to use a previous class from a parent container. So for example, up here on the outermost container of this button block, the one with the block ID, you can see that all of the button blocks get a class of button block. So a way that I can essentially drill down in terms of specificity is to first target the button block and then include a space this time, and then target the SQS block button element medium. So when you include a space between classes, you're looking for classes within other classes. So you're looking for elements within other elements. So in this case, we're targeting the button block, and then within this container, we're looking for a container with a class of SQS block button element medium. So as we drill down here, we can see, oh, within this button block container, there is a class called SQS block button element medium. So this is, you can see our styling now applies again. So this is also, it's the same specificity as we had previously. It's two classes, but instead of using two classes on a single element, we're using a class from a parent element and then the class on the element itself. So this is a great way to target multiple elements, but the problem that we're running into is now every medium button block on the site is now going to have that styling. So how can we limit our CSS to just a single section? So to target a single section in Squarespace 7.1, we can right-click on the section and click Inspect. And then you'll want to navigate up until you have the outermost section container. So you'll be able to see that each section on the page, as I scroll down and hover over it, has a section tag and then a class of page section. And there's a bunch of different classes on here. So the way that we can just target a single section is to use the data section ID. So these are unique IDs for each section on the page. So I'll double click on that data section ID. I'm going to press Control A to highlight everything and then Control C to copy. And now the way that you target data elements, so this is a data element, you can see data section ID. The way that you target data elements in CSS is by including that data section ID in brackets. So what we can do is we can come here before these classes, and I'm just going to open some brackets and then paste my data section ID. And so now we're looking for a section with this data section ID. Then within that, we're looking for this button block class. And then within that container, we're looking for this SQS block button element medium class. So now you can see that button down here, back to normal. We're now only limiting our targeting to this one section. So that's a great way to change multiple elements within a single section, is to limit it to the data section ID, and then you can use the classes for those elements to then limit the CSS scope further. So what if we wanted to add this styling to multiple sections? So we don't want it to apply to every button on the site like what's happening before if we were to take this away. But we do want it to apply to multiple sections. So how could we do that? Well, the best way to do that is to simply open up some curly brackets, and we're going to include all of this CSS here inside of those curly brackets. So Squarespace uses a less preprocessor, CSS preprocessor, and less just allows you to do some cool things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do without a preprocessor, and nesting is one of those things. So the same way we're able to look for elements within other elements by including a space between classes, we can do the same thing with nesting classes. So this is the same thing. Within this data section, we're then looking for this class, and we're looking for this class within this class, within this section. So that was, I explained that a little bit confusing, but hopefully you understand that nesting is similar to just looking for elements within other elements. So you'll see that our CSS still applies here, and it only applies to this one section, which is great. So what if we then wanted it to apply to this section as well? Well, what we can do is now right click, click inspect. We'll pull the data section ID for this section. I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to add a comma, open up some brackets, and I'm going to paste that data section ID between the brackets. And so now we can target multiple blocks in multiple sections. So you can see it's only applying to these two sections now. And I could add any number of data section IDs that I wanted, and this styling, this button styling, would only apply to those specific sections that I add. So targeting multiple data sections is super helpful for targeting multiple sections, but you might come across a time when you want to make a CSS edit, but you only want it to apply to a single page. So maybe, for example, we want to change all of our buttons on this page, but we only want to make that change on this one page. So instead of, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, instead of like having to add 7 data section IDs right here, instead we can just limit the scope of our CSS to a single page. So if I right click and inspect, and I scroll all the way up the HTML here to the body class, so each page gets a unique collection ID. And so this ID is unique to that single page. So no other page is going to have this collection ID. So it's a great way to limit the scope of your CSS to a single page. So if I just go ahead and copy this ID here, I can target an ID with a hashtag, and I'll paste that collection ID in there. So now all medium button blocks on this page are going to have that styling inherited. So let's go ahead and see what the deal is. So this is a large button block, that's why that styling wasn't applying. So I'll go ahead and make these medium as well. So you can see that it's truly applying to all medium button blocks in any section, but only on this page. Okay, great. So now if I were to go to another page, and I was to add a medium button block, you can see if I change it to medium and hit apply, it's not inheriting that styling because we've limited our CSS to just the home page here. And I can change this button block, which I believe is also a large button block. We'll change that to a medium one as well. Great. So that is a great way to limit the scope of your CSS to only a single page. So we just talked about how to target a single page, but what if I want to target multiple pages? Like what if I want my button styling to also apply to this page here? Well, all I have to do is find the collection ID for this page. So I'll scroll all the way up to the body. And the body is pretty easy to find. It starts with body. The tag is body, but it has a ton of classes on it. So it's pretty easy to find. And then you just copy the collection ID by double clicking on it. I'm using Control-C to copy it. And then I'll just separate my collection IDs with a comma and make sure I'm targeting the ID with a hashtag. So now this medium button block on this page, any medium button block that I add on this page will also inherit that styling. So let me go ahead and add another medium button block, and you can see it's inheriting that styling as well. So you can simply open up some curly brackets, write your CSS within those curly brackets, and then you can add as many collection IDs as you want to target as many pages as you want to have this styling. So now we can kind of put this all together. So let's say I wanted to target multiple pages. Let's see, what do I want to do? I'm just going to start from scratch. So let's say I want to target all the button blocks just on this one section. I'm going to click inspect. I'm going to grab the data section ID for this section. We target data IDs by using brackets. And then I can open up some curly brackets. I'm going to use the SQS block button element medium class to target these buttons. Another thing I could do is just target the SQS block button element class, because it doesn't matter what size the button is. Our styling would apply to all button elements, no matter what their size was. So for example, let's change this middle one to a large. And now I'll right click on it, click inspect, and you can see that even the large button blocks have this SQS block button element class. So that's what I'm going to use to target these buttons. I'll target my class, open up some curly brackets, and now I can change the background color to red for each one of these button blocks. But now let's say I only want this one single block. I want this one to be yellow. So I'm going to find the block ID for this block, because block IDs are the best way to target a single block. And still within this data section ID curly bracket, I'm going to target the block ID for that one block, and I'll change the background color to pink. Oh, and remember, I need to target the link itself. There we go. So now I've targeted all the blocks in this section red, but then for this one specific block, I'm overriding that CSS and I'm turning the background color pink just for this one button. Now, what else can we do? Let's say for all the other button blocks on the page, we want them to be yellow. Well, so we've written specific CSS for this one data section, but what if we want all the other blocks on the page to have yellow buttons? What we can do is limit the scope of our CSS to just this one collection ID. So I'm going to limit the scope of my CSS to only this page. copy this collection ID. I'll add a hashtag there to target the collection ID, and I'll open up some curly brackets. And now I can target all the button blocks on the page. In fact, I've already done that here with this SQS block button element class. So I'm going to copy that and paste that in there. And we want all the other buttons to have a green background. So you can see that this CSS is overriding my red background color that I want these buttons to have. And the reason for that is collection IDs are more specific than just targeting something by its data attribute. So IDs are the most specific CSS that you can write. So one way to make sure that this CSS doesn't override my background color for the buttons in this data section is to just make sure that I am including this data section targeting within this page collection curly bracket. So the specificity will then be transferred to these buttons as well. So now you can see all of the buttons on the page are green, except for this one data section ID, which is within this collection. I'm changing their background colors to red, except for this one block, which I'm targeting by its block ID. I'm changing the background color to pink. So that's how you can use different levels of specificity to make different levels of changes to your Squarespace website. So again, on this one page, I'm turning all the buttons green. In this one section on this one page, I'm turning all the buttons red, and then I'm overriding that and changing this one button in this one section on this one page pink. So I hope this CSS mini masterclass was helpful for you in terms of learning how to use scope to make very specific CSS changes all the way to very broad CSS changes in terms of targeting multiple blocks on multiple pages, all the way down to changing a single block in a single section. So if you did find this helpful and you learned a lot, I highly recommend you check out the course in the description below. It goes over all of the classes for the different elements in a Squarespace 7.1 template. So it's a template structure analysis. And so the question I get a lot from people is, how do you know which class to target to make the changes that you want to make? And so this course aims to answer that question for you by going through all the different elements and all the different classes and giving you a better understanding of the structure of the templates. And so that will make the CSS portion much, much easier if you understand the classes and the elements that the website has. So if this was helpful for you, please check out the course in the description below. I think you'll get a lot of value from it. All right, that's it for me. I will see you in the next one.